So picture this. You are sitting there. Maybe you're in a really high-stakes meeting or, at a super crowded dinner party.
Or even just, like, trying to navigate a busy train station in a totally new city.
Exactly. Yes, and you have this exact thought, right? Like this precise question is perfectly formed in your mind.
You know exactly what you want to ask.
Right. You know exactly what information you need to extract from the person standing right in front of you. But right as you open your mouth, the gears just grind to an absolute halt. You just freeze.
That's the worst feeling.
It really is. Suddenly you realize you just don't possess the conversational tools to make that question sound natural. And you don't want to come across as demanding, right?
Oh, definitely not. And you certainly don't want to sound incompetent either.
Right. So rather than risking the social friction, you just swallow the question entirely and you stay quiet. You just don't ask it.
Yeah, and it is an incredibly common paralysis. Yeah. Honestly, it happens to everyone.
Really? Like even native speakers? Oh, absolutely. Whether you are attempting to navigate a second language or you're simply trying to strike the appropriate tone in your native tongue, that freezing mechanism is universal.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, the friction you're experiencing in that exact moment, it has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of curiosity.
Okay, so what is it about then?
Well, the friction is entirely about the delivery mechanism. I mean, we basically get trapped in this terrifying liminal space between, the conceptualization of a thought and the actual physical expression of that thought.
So basically, instead of asking the question, you just stay quiet.
Exactly.
Well, today we are extracting a conversational framework that solves exactly this paralysis. We're pulling from a highly focused source today. It's an excerpt from a broader text called The Art of Natural Inquiry in English.
Right.
And specifically, this text dissects a framework laid out in a show called English with Ava. We're looking really closely at their episode 34, which features the hosts Ava and Alex. And what is really truthful to understand from the outset here is that while our source material is explicitly framed around providing tools for English language learners, what Ava and Alex are actually doing is deconstructing the underlying architecture of human interaction itself.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, they're breaking down the mechanics of a polite, confident request. Because, asking questions is never merely about data retrieval.
Right. It's not just like querying a database.
Exactly. It is entirely about navigating really complex social dynamics.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source text begins with this exact disconnect between what we intend to communicate and how we, physically express it.
Mm-hmm.
In the opening of the excerpt, the host Alex points out that sometimes we know what we want to ask, but we don't know the right words. And he frames this not as some, rare anomaly, but as a fundamental hurdle that affects almost every single learner.
What's fascinating here is how the source immediately elevates this frustration. I mean, Ava and Alex, they do not dismiss this freezing response as just a simple lack of vocabulary.
Right. They don't just say, oh, study your flashcards more.
Exactly. They actually treat it as the primary psychological barrier to communication. Like when a learner freezes, it is not because they are confused about the topic at hand.
So it's not a comprehension issue?
No, not at all. The barrier is the brain's acute fear of unnatural delivery, which, if you really boil it down, is essentially a fear of social rejection.
Man, that makes so much sense. It's like driving a manual transmission car, right?
Oh, I like this. Go on.
So when you are entirely fluent and comfortable with a stick shift, shifting gears happens totally subconsciously. Like your foot finds the clutch, your hand moves the stick, and you literally don't even think about it.
Right. It's just automatic.
Exactly. But when you lack the vocabulary or, you're hyper aware of your own phrasing in a conversation, it's like you're suddenly staring down at your feet in the car, you're overthinking the clutch, the timing is completely off, and the engine just stalls out right in the middle of a busy intersection.
That is a perfect mechanical analogy for what is happening neurologically.
Yeah, because the vehicle works perfectly fine, right? Like your brain works. But the manual operation of it just completely overwhelms you.
Yes, precisely. Because when you overthink the delivery, your prefrontal cortex becomes totally overloaded with the task of translation and social calculation all at once.
Oh, wow. So you just short circuit.
Basically, yeah. And the stall in your analogy is the silence that follows in the conversation. And the source text highlights that this lack of quote-unquote right words leads directly to silence.
And silence is not what you want when you're trying to learn.
Right. In any learning environment, silence is the ultimate enemy of progress. Ava and Alex recognize that the solution isn't to force learners to memorize these dense, abstract grammar rules.
Because that just adds more cognitive load, I'd imagine.
Exactly. So the solution they offer is to provide everyday expressions, like these pre-packaged conversational tools that bypass that cognitive overload entirely.
So if the problem is that our internal translation engine is stalling out because it's trying to invent polite phrasing completely from scratch, then the solution has to be bypassing that process entirely.
That's the core idea, yes.
And this is exactly where Ava introduces this very specific 5-step framework. And looking at the source, these 5 steps aren't just a random list of vocabulary words either.
No, they're not.
They seem heavily engineered, like they're psychological strategies designed to basically diffuse different types of social threats.
They absolutely are. I mean, the framework categorizes human inquiry by analyzing the specific social pressure being applied at any given moment.
Okay, walk me through that. Let's look at the first category.
Sure. So we can think of this first one as diffusing the threat of a transactional demand. This covers step 1, which the text labels asking for information, and step 2, which is asking for help.
Right. Okay. So for step 1, asking for an information, the text provides these phrases like, could you tell me? Or, do you know? And then for step 2, asking for help, the phrases are like, could you help me? Or would you mind helping me?
We really need to look closely at the linguistic mechanics here, though. The text heavily emphasizes the intentional use of softening phrases.
Softening phrases,
Yeah.
like the could and the would.
Exactly. Specifically, they're using modal verbs like could and these conditional structures like would you mind. Now, we have to ask ourselves why politeness is so mechanically important in these specific scenarios.
I mean, you just want to be nice, right?
Well, it goes deeper than just being nice. Think about it. When you ask a stranger for information or you request their help, you are making an unsolicited demand on their time and on their cognitive load.
Oh, right. Like you are effectively interrupting their internal monologue. You are forcing their brain to stop whatever it was doing before you walked up, and they have to pay attention to you now.
Precisely. From a psychological standpoint, when you interrupt someone with a direct question, their prefrontal cortex has to instantly halt its current task, process your auditory input, and then retrieve the data you're asking for.
That sounds exhausting when you put it like that.
It does, because that sudden task switching requires actual mental energy. And human beings have natural evolutionary defenses against unsolicited demands.
Wait, really? Evolution comes into play here.
Absolutely. If you simply walk up to someone and state, tell me the answer, or help me, that directness triggers a mild fight or flight response.
Wow.
Yeah, it's perceived as a command. So it creates instant resistance in the other person.
Okay, wait, let me push back on step 2 here for a second, though.
Sure, go ahead.
If I approach someone and say, would you mind helping me? Doesn't that run the risk of sounding maybe passive-aggressive? Or overly formal, depending on your tone? I mean,
Right.
how do we balance the polite grammar the source is giving us with not sounding like a robotic aristocrat?
That is a highly relevant distinction to make, and it really comes down to the psychological concept of optionality.
Optionality, like giving them an option.
Exactly. When the text suggests using would you mind, it isn't prescribing this stiff robotic formality. It's actually prescribing a psychological release valve.
Oh, I see.
By phrasing the demand as a conditional question, you are linguistically providing the other person with a way out. You are giving them the illusion of choice.
Even if you desperately need their help, right? Like you're stranded.
Yes. Even if you desperately need it, framing it as an option lowers their conversational defenses. The phrasing basically absorbs the shock of the interruption.
So it softens the blow before they even realize they've been interrupted in the first place. You're essentially apologizing for the cognitive load you're placing on them.
Which paradoxically makes them much more willing to actually take on that load.
Man, that is so clever. It is emotional intelligence engineered directly into the syntax.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. And by memorizing these specific softening phrases, the learner is given this tool that guarantees a socially graceful interaction.
Right, without having to constantly calculate the other person's defensiveness in real time while you're talking.
Exactly. You just deploy the phrase.
Okay, so if softening phrases solve the problem of asking for things, how do we handle the ultimate conversational failure? I'm talking about when we simply do not understand what was just said to us.
Yes. The hardest part.
Yeah, which leads us right into step 3 of the framework, asking someone to repeat. And the text gives us phrases here like, could you say that again? And can you repeat that, please?
This step introduces a completely different psychological dynamic from the first two.
How so?
Well, steps 1 and 2 were about managing an external threat, right? The threat of bothering someone else. Step 3 is entirely about managing an internal failure.
Oh, man.
It addresses the moment of highest friction in literally any interaction. That terrifying moment where you have to admit a lack of comprehension.
It is that visceral panic, like someone gives you an answer, your brain just fails to process it, and suddenly you are just staring at them blankly.
And we really have to look at the neurology of that panic. For anyone trying to appear competent, whether that's in a new language or, boardroom meeting or just a casual conversation, admitting you didn't understand feels like a massive vulnerability.
Huge. It feels terrible.
Right. Your brain interprets that vulnerability as a direct threat to your social standing. So what happens? Your cognitive load spikes, but entirely in the wrong direction.
What do you mean?
Instead of using your energy to process the language or figure out context clues, your brain starts racing to formulate an apology. You start trying to invent an excuse for why you didn't hear them, just trying desperately to save face.
Oh, so you are burning all your mental energy on the apology rather than the actual conversation.
Exactly. You're totally distracted. And the source text intervenes right at this moment of panic by offering a standardized, socially acceptable script. Can you repeat that, please?
I see. So by having that script completely preloaded, it completely bypasses the need to invent an apology on the spot.
Yes. It acts as a social safety net. Ava is removing the massive cognitive burden of face saving. You do not need to explain that the room was loud.
Or that you lost focus for a second.
Or that their accent threw you off, exactly. Yeah. You just deploy the script. It normalizes the act of not understanding.
It just lets you reset.
It allows you to pause the interaction, hit the reset button, and try again without sacrificing your dignity.
It goes back to that manual transmission analogy from earlier.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, when the engine stalls out in the intersection because you didn't understand, you don't need to, get out of the car and explain to everyone around you why you stalled. You just need to know the exact mechanical sequence to restart the engine quickly so you can keep moving.
Yes.
And could you say that again? Is just the ignition switch.
That is a highly effective way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
It is a purely functional mechanism to keep the communication moving forward.
Okay, so now, looking at the source, the framework takes a massive pivot here. We move from managing these threats and failures into what we could call forcing connection.
Right, the final 2 steps.
Yeah, the final 2 steps are the relational questions. So step 4 is asking for opinions, providing phrases like, what do you think? Or what's your opinion?
Mm-hmm.
And then step 5 is asking follow-up questions to maintain the conversation, using examples like, why do you think so? And can you tell me more about that?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the source material, the progression is actually quite brilliant.
Tell me more about that. See what I did there?
Very nice. But really, think about it. Steps 1, 2, and 3 were fundamentally self-centered. I need information. I need assistance. I need you to repeat yourself because my brain failed to process the data.
Right. They're entirely I-focused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But steps 4 and 5 shift the focal point entirely onto the other person.
So you move from extracting utility from the other person to validating their perspective.
Validation is the exact mechanism at play here. Step 4, asking what do you think, is an explicit invitation for the other person to take center stage. But the true genius of this framework really lies in step 5, the follow-ups.
Specifically, the phrase, can you tell me more about that?
Yes. Let's break down the profound psychology behind that specific phrase. When you are in a conversation, especially one where you maybe feel slightly out of your depth, there is an immense pressure to generate highly intelligent, highly specific follow-up questions.
Oh, totally. Just to prove that you're actively listening and that you belong there.
Right. If someone is explaining the nuances of a complex project, your brain scrambles to find some technical detail to question them on.
Which usually leads right back to that freezing response we talked about. Because if you don't know the topic well enough, you stall out trying to invent a smart question.
But can you tell me more about that? Eliminates that pressure entirely. It is just a masterclass in conversational leverage.
Because it's so broad.
Because you do not have to generate a specific thought. It requires zero cognitive load from the asker. None. Yet, it yields a massive return because it exploits a fundamental human trait.
It exploits the fact that people absolutely love talking about themselves and their own ideas.
It capitalizes on the narcissism of conversation. And I mean that in the most benign sociological sense possible.
Truly.
But human beings receive a literal dopamine hit when they share their own opinions, and they feel that those opinions are valued by someone else.
Yeah, it feels great to be listened to.
By deploying, can you tell me more about that? You are basically handing them the microphone. You put the burden of the conversation entirely back in their court, but you do it in a way that makes them feel incredibly respected.
You don't have to be an expert in whatever they're discussing. You just have to be an expert in deploying curiosity. It really is the ultimate skeleton key because it works in literally any context.
And within the context of the source text, which, remember, is aimed at language acquisition, this creates a highly advantageous, self-sustaining loop.
How does that loop work?
The learner asks one simple, low-effort question, and in return, they receive an avalanche of natural language data. They get more listening practice, they get more exposure to vocabulary, and more context.
And all of that is generated just by prompting the other person to keep talking.
Exactly.
Well, theory is wonderful, but here's where it gets really interesting in the source material. Ava and Alex, the hosts, they don't just hand down these 5 rules from the mountaintop and end the lesson.
No, they don't.
They actually transition into a meta demonstration. They execute a full natural conversation example where Alex utilizes the exact framework they just spent the deep dive dissecting to interview Ava.
It is a vital pedagogical shift in the text. They move from abstract linguistic theory into concrete, real-time application. It proves that the tools function seamlessly in a fluid dialogue.
Yeah, so Alex begins with a polite inquiry, perfectly mirroring the softening phrases we discussed earlier. He says, "Ava, can I ask you something?"
Right, step 1.
And once she consents, he asks for information. "How do you improve your English every day?" And Ava responds with 3 specific, actionable habits. According to the text, she says, "I practice speaking, listen to English podcasts, and learn new vocabulary every day."
So let's isolate the mechanical structure of this exchange really quickly.
Okay.
Alex uses a softened step 1 to initiate the conversation. Ava provides the data. Then Alex immediately deploys a variation of step 5.
The follow-up.
Yes. He uses a validating follow-up statement saying, "That's a great habit," which effectively prompts Ava to elaborate further. And her elaboration is actually the concluding thesis of the entire text.
Right. Ava responds by saying, "Absolutely. Asking questions is one of the fastest ways to learn English naturally."
We really must analyze the depth of that specific assertion. Asking questions is one of the fastest ways to learn naturally. This is a complete paradigm shift regarding the function of an inquiry.
Because usually people think asking a question means you don't know something.
Exactly. In many academic or professional settings, asking a question is viewed as a confession of ignorance. It's seen as a lack of preparation. But the source text asserts that questioning is not a passive plea for help at all.
It's an active tool.
It is the primary engine of active learning.
So it shifts the learner from being a passive receptacle, just waiting to be filled with grammar rules, into an active director of their own environmental input.
Precisely. By utilizing the 5-step framework, you are not merely practicing vocabulary. You are actively manipulating your environment to provide you with the exact linguistic data you require in that specific moment.
You are pulling the language out of the world rather than waiting for a textbook to dictate what you should learn next.
That's beautifully said, yes.
And, looking at Ava's 3 daily habits, there is a brilliant piece of validation happening right now for you, the person listening to this deep dive.
Oh, absolutely.
The source explicitly lists listening to English podcasts as a foundational pillar of natural improvement, right alongside speaking and vocabulary acquisition. This text is directly validating the utility of long-form conversational audio.
Because it provides the vital component of immersion. When you engage with a conversational format, you aren't just absorbing facts or rules.
Yeah.
You are internalizing the natural cadence of human speech.
You're hearing the rhythm.
Right. You're hearing how softening phrases are deployed in real time, how follow-up questions dictate the flow of the exchange. You are subconsciously absorbing the architecture of natural inquiry just by listening.
But the text doesn't let anyone off the hook with just passive listening either. The source moves into its final phase, an actionable challenge.
The homework.
Yeah, the homework. Ava gives the audience a specific directive. Today's challenge is to ask 5 different questions in English using the phrases you learned today.
And this is the necessary bridge between theory and practice. The hosts understand that passively understanding the psychology of cognitive load or, the utility of mobile verbs, that isn't going to magically prevent the freezing response we discussed at the very beginning.
Right, because reading about a stick shift doesn't mean you can drive one without stalling.
Exactly. Theoretical knowledge cannot override the physical paralysis of a social interaction. The only remedy is to actually build the behavioral habit.
And Alex adds a really fascinating caveat to this challenge, too. He notes that you can practice these 5 questions with a friend, with a family member, or, and this is the detail that really stands out, even by speaking to yourself.
This raises an important question regarding the mechanics of skill acquisition.
What's that?
Well, if the entire framework is designed to manage complex social dynamics and interpersonal threats, why would the source specifically validate practicing alone in an empty room?
Yeah, how does talking to yourself solve the problem of freezing up in front of a stranger?
It solves it by isolating the variables.
Okay.
When we discussed the panic response earlier, we noted that the cognitive load spikes because the brain is trying to translate a thought, physically articulate it, and manage the social threat of rejection simultaneously, all at once.
Right, it's too much juggling.
But speaking to oneself removes the social threat entirely. It creates a completely zero-stakes environment.
It is the conversational equivalent of shadowboxing.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, think about it. A fighter doesn't just step into the ring for the first time and hope they know how to throw a punch under pressure.
They get knocked out.
Exactly. They stand in front of a mirror and practice the exact physical mechanics of the jab thousands of times in the air. That way, when an opponent is actually standing in front of them trying to hit back, the physical movement of the jab is totally automatic.
That is exactly what is happening on a physiological level here.
Yep.
When you practice the phrase, "Would you mind helping me?" out loud in an empty room, you are building physical muscle memory in your articulators.
So literally your mouth muscles.
Yes, your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords, they are all learning the precise sequence of movements required to produce those sounds. You are hardwiring the tool.
So that when the cognitive load of a real social interaction finally hits you, the physical execution of the phrase requires zero conscious thought.
You are greasing the gears of that manual transmission before you ever drive it into traffic.
That's it. And Ava summarizes this with a very stark mathematical equation at the very end of the text. She says, the more questions you ask, the more confident your English will become.
It's very direct.
It's presented as an undeniable compounding equation. The volume of inquiry directly equals the volume of confidence.
Because confidence in communication, it isn't a personality trait.
It's not.
No, it is simply the byproduct of repetition. The 5-step framework provides the psychological safety boundaries, sure, but the actual confidence only materializes through the physical act of deploying those tools over and over again.
So what does this all mean for you? Let's synthesize the journey this text took us on, because it is far, far more than just a list of polite phrases.
Definitely.
We started by examining that universal, paralyzing disconnect between having a thought and freezing up before you can express it, unpacking how the fear of unnatural delivery causes our internal translation engine to stall.
And we analyze how the source solves this through highly engineered phrases. Steps 1 and 2, asking for information and help. They utilize softening phrases and modal verbs to introduce optionality. This successfully bypasses the evolutionary defenses that humans have against unsolicited demands.
Then we looked at step 3, the vulnerability of not understanding, and how phrases like, "Can you repeat that, please?" act as a vital social safety net. It completely removed the cognitive burden of having to invent an apology when our comprehension just fails.
From there, we explored the pivot to relational dynamics in steps 4 and 5. We discussed the sheer utility of open-ended follow-ups like, "Can you tell me more about that?"
The ultimate skeleton key.
Right, because it requires zero cognitive load from the asker while exploiting the deep human desire to be heard and validated, which creates a beautiful, self-sustaining loop of natural conversation.
We saw Ava and Alex demonstrate this in real time, proving Ava's thesis that asking questions isn't a sign of weakness, but the primary engine of active learning. And finally, we broke down the necessity of the 5-question challenge, exploring how speaking to yourself builds the critical muscle memory required to override the freezing response.
Which leads right back to the ultimate philosophy of the text. As Alex states, every question is another opportunity to learn something new.
I love that quote.
This framework is fundamentally a mechanism for maintaining a posture of relentless curiosity. It is about equipping yourself with the tools to actively pull knowledge, connection, and clarity from the world around you, rather than passively waiting for it to be offered to you.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, something that builds on the mechanics we've explored but points them in a slightly different direction.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, the source material designed these 5 steps to help language learners survive and thrive in a new environment, right? But I want you to think about your own native language. Think about the conversations you have every single day where you are perfectly fluent.
The ones you don't even think about.
Right. How many opportunities for genuine insight or deep connection do we completely miss because we failed to deploy step 5?
Wow. Yeah.
How would your relationships, your one-on-one meetings at work, or even just your casual interactions change tomorrow if you consciously suppress the urge to just offer your own opinion and instead simply ask, can you tell me more about that? Just one more time than you usually do.
That's a great question.
The syntax might be incredibly simple, but the neurological doors they open in the person you are speaking to are massive.
It is a powerful reminder that the mechanics of curiosity are universally applicable no matter what language you're speaking.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of inquiry. Take these tools, build that muscle memory in the mirror, and stay relentlessly curious. We will catch you next time.